Welcome to Created Healthy. I'm Dawn Combs. It's a common idea that God gave us everything we need in nature, but do we believe it enough to walk that out in truth? Often the very same people who say this go looking for answers on how to use food and medicine from man-made sources. Everything man creates comes with a user's manual. Why would God be any different? I challenge you to join me in seeking revelation about our body, mind, soul, and spirit health by digging into His written word and in practicing pure science in the visible world of His creation.
2 Samuel chapters 19 through 21 are rich with stories of covenants, the result of covenants, what happens when they're kept and what happens when they aren't. And we're learning, I think, here the notion that a broken covenant doesn't just end, it has ripples out throughout other peoples, other generations, and still needs to be corrected to stop those ripples from continuing. So we start out here. David's son Absalom was defeated in battle and killed in chapter 18. And so David is mourning. Job, who has been his leader, his military leader for some time, Job isn't, he's a complicated figure. He can be filled with good advice and be strong and decisive. Honestly, I think he has been put into a position of being decisive where David wasn't able to. He was weak in that skill, and maybe he got too filled with that and overstepped in the end. Here in chapter 20, actually, Job winds up killing Abishai, and he does it in such a way that we're going to have problems as a result. He actually, let's see, it's Amasa. He kills Amasa, not Abishai. He kills Amasa, and it says that his sword falls out and then accidentally strikes Amasa in the belly, and he dies. And this is an ally. This is somebody that is that should have been helping David's cause, and Job kills him. And so it's not a just killing. It's not something that God ordained. That's sort of an aside here, but Job, I think, gets maybe unfairly put into a role that he wasn't fully equipped with. David was getting instructions from God, not Job, and Job kept having to pick up the slack for David, and eventually that became an unhealthy situation for Job, and he took on too much power without God's direction. But Job says to David, as he's mourning his son, look, you love those who hate you and hate those who love you. And this is a central problem with David, along with the hesitation that I mentioned. David is always running after people. He's chasing this love that he feels he should get from father figures, and he can't get, so he loves them and he shows mercy, and he chases after this feeling instead of realizing that he should be taking care of those that actually love him and not chasing those who hate him. But we start with this notion of Job getting him, trying to get him to see this upside down view that he has. And we have Mephibosheth coming to David, and we see David questioning him. He had thought that Mephibosheth had betrayed him as he was running away and gone over to Absalom. But here he finds out face to face that that is not the case. And he fulfills his covenant with Jonathan, his best friend, that he will take care of his descendants. And he restores lands back to Mephibosheth that he had taken away and given to the person that had lied to him. We go down to chapter 21, and we're seeing a 3-year famine. And David prays about this, and why are we seeing this famine? And God says that the land is acting on the wrongness of the broken covenant that Israel had with the Gibeonites. And Saul had broken that by killing them. He broke a covenant, and the land is suffering as a result. This goes back to elements of Genesis that I was fascinated with. This notion that God talks about the land as being something that we are of the land. We have a connection with the land that goes very, very deep. We are in our very makeup connected to the soil, to the land. And when we commit a wrongness, it curses the land around us. So here we have this happening again. As a result, David says, well, okay, the Gibeonites can ask for 7 sons of Saul to hang, and that is to make up for the broken covenant. And they take him up on it. And they take sons from a woman named Ritzpah and another woman named Merab, and those are 2 of Saul's concubines. And between the two, their sons are making up this group of 7 that gets taken and hung. And there's a really beautiful passage here where Ritzpah actually spreads sackcloth underneath where the bodies have been taken and hung, and she spends her days keeping the birds and the beasts away from the bodies. She is ensuring that these bodies are being respected and cared for, and mourning there. And David is moved, so he sees this example, and it moves him to go and get Saul and Jonathan's bones that are and bring them back to their original land. Again, this connection with the land. He brings the bones back and puts them in the grave of Kish, Saul's father, in Benjamin. So he brings those bones back to where they originated. The connection with the land is that we are to arise out of the land, and then we are to be committed back to that land. And it is a completed circle and a cycle of the resources that we are made up of. We are made up of the earth. We return to the earth. We give back to the earth. David realizes that he sees this now. He sees that this covenant must be continued and respected. And he brings Saul and Jonathan back, and he prays for the land. He prays for the land again. It says that God is moved by his prayer for the land, and the famine is ended, and David is restored back to a good place. He goes home, and he's actually not going to war anymore. Very interesting here at the end. There's a catalog of war against giants. So those of you who are interested in that sort of history in the Bible, there are 3 separate giants that are discussed here at the end of, it's at the end of chapter 21 that David defeats amongst the Philistines. But David is beginning to set out a new champion in his place instead of him going out against the giant. He has other champions now that are going against. This chapter, these 3 chapters are, as I said, rich in the need for following through on covenants. Sometimes when a covenant is broken, it means that other people pay instead of, like, if we make a covenant and we break it, it means that other people pay. There is a wrongness in the land. There is, to the extent of, God shows us here in the Old Testament that it can trigger famines. There is such a wrongness in the land. That is something to deeply think about. What broken covenants would do to how the humans that were living on that land would they stop caring for parts of the land? Would they lose resources to be able to buy seeds and till the land, or resources to have animals running across the fields and keeping the soil healthy? Um, it is it is important. Again, I think we talked about this yesterday. It's so important to understand how connected, interconnected we are with the people that we live on the land with. We are interconnected with the land. We are interconnected with the people. The sins that we commit don't just affect us. Broken covenants don't just affect us. And eventually, a broken covenant doesn't just sit there and end. Eventually, somebody needs to pick that thread up and solve the problem. We see this with our bodies. We see this with health. This is a foundational truth of our existence here on this earthly plane, is there is a connectedness, and one thing that we do, one choice that we make that goes against God's path causes a ripple effect. When we apply this to our health in the body, one choice that we make can become a foundational problem of a degenerative disease that now needs to be dealt with. And the answer isn't to continue to deal with all of the symptoms. It is to go back to the root cause. It is to go back to the original breaking, the original walking off the path, and to solve that. That's why, and if you've ever talked with me for health, I talk about what's the root cause? How did we get here? What's the first thing that we did that put us going in the wrong direction? You have to go back and fix that. And then you have to suffer the consequences. And so do everybody else who is interconnected with you. And so does the land. And if we think about that for too long, you can start to unravel how we've gotten to where we are, how our people are so sick, and how the land is so sick. I pray that God is blessing you today and giving you that insight. If you are ill, if you are imbalanced, I pray that God is giving you insight into where you stepped off the path originally. What small decision did you make to go in a different direction? Or what small decision did your mother or your grandmother or your father make that is impacting you? I pray that God gives you that insight so that you can turn and go back to that covenant or that step and to correct it.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with a friend. And I'm always interested in hearing what God is laying on your heart. So drop me a rating or review, or join the conversation on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube at Dawn Combs Really.